Hello, my name is Xavier Panaya, and this is my lab report on Experiment 2, the reaction of copper and percent yield. So here we have the diagram of the reactions that occurred throughout the sequence, and you can see right here we started with solid copper, and we then added nitric acid to it in the beginning. After we added nitric acid, copper 2 nitrate was formed in an aqueous form, H2O in the form of liquid, and NO2 gas was formed. We know that each of these components was formed because of observing the reaction. Copper nitrate was formed, and we know this because a clear green aqueous solution was made. We know that water is present because an aqueous solution needs a base area to create this compound within it. And then we also know that NO2 gas was formed because a brownish red gas came off of the solution once the nitric acid was added to the copper. We then added sodium hydroxide to the solution, and two new compounds were formed. First was copper 2 hydroxide, and then sodium nitrate was also formed. Copper hydroxide was in the form of a solid, and sodium nitrate was in an aqueous solution. We know that copper hydroxide was formed because a royal blue solid forms, and this royal blue solid forms in a bright blue aqueous solution. And after we let this settle down and everything, we then put it on a hot plate and stirred it until it turned black. And after heating, we found that copper oxide was formed along with H2O. And we knew that copper oxide was formed because of the black precipitate that was formed as we stirred on the hot plate. And then H2O was also formed because this precipitate then became present in a clear liquid. Once this settled down and we decanted, we then added sulfuric acid to the solid. And after adding sulfuric acid, we then found that copper sulfate formed, and also the water still stayed present in the solution. We know that copper sulfate formed because the solution then became a bright blue clear solution, and also since it was an aqueous solution, water is still present, therefore H2O is still a present compound in the solution. After all this was then done, we then added zinc to the solution, and a series of reactions, bubbling, and color changes occurred, and we then found that the bubbling was H2 gas, and we found that zinc sulfate was formed in a form of a clear kind of precipitate. And finally, a reddish-brown precipitate was also formed, which was our recovered copper that we would then weigh out in the end. So if we go down here, after re-measuring everything, we have to find the percent yield, which is found by taking the recovered mass of copper over the initial mass of copper, then multiplying by 100. Our recovered mass was 0.491 grams of copper, and our initial mass was 0.5 grams of copper. After dividing those out, we multiply by 100 to then get 98.2% yield. In this experiment, a series of percent errors can occur, just like in every other experiment. If we are, one example of falling below 100% would be a series of decantation errors. So it is very hard to pour out the solution without losing some precipitate. And if you lose precipitate, it actually takes away from your percent yield, which will then make you fall below 100%, which could be a big reason why we fell below 100% in our experiment. And if you're going over 100%, ethanol was added to the solid copper in the end, and if not all the ethanol evaporated before reweighing, that can cause the weight to be higher than 100% and your yield to be off. We can reference the lab manual. Here you can see my notes for the weights, and you can also see the observations I made from the reactions, and you can reference pages 8 through 12 in the lab manual. Thank you for listening to my presentation.